Welcome to PoliSports Tea Time. That's your favorite auntie with Uncle Tendencies. And today we pouring a pot that's boiling on every burner. This ain't a secret story. This is a power story. Who has it, who's losing their grip, and who's finally deciding they're done asking for permission. Because Kyrie Irving just made a move that has the entire sports world, political world, and economic world buzzing. He partnered with ANTA, yes, the Chinese sportswear heavyweight, to launch a multi-year full uniform sponsorship for HBCUs. And one of the very first schools in the rollout, Paul Quinn College in Dallas, the only HBCU in that city. One of 14 schools. This isn't dabbling, this is a blueprint. And here's where the conversation gets serious. Kyrie's not just an athlete with a signature shoe, he's the creative director of his own basketball division at ANTA. He has equity, he has creative control, all the things he was never getting at Nike, and instead of hoarding that access, he's channeling it straight into the HBCUs, institutions that major American brands consistently ignore unless it's time for a photo op. Kyrie is putting forward a new model. Black institutions don't get scraps, they get investments. So the question on the table is this. Are we watching the beginning of a geopolitical pivot inside the Black athlete economy? Is Kyrie, intentionally or not, opening the door for a global power to do what American brands refuse to do for HBCUs and Black athletes? And what does that mean for Black consumers, HBCU sports, and the entire ecosystem around Black athletic labor? And since we're stepping directly into global economics, political maneuvering, and the way power really moves behind the scenes, I'm calling him my co-host, the one who always cuts through the noise and exposes what the mainstream won't touch, Political Ill. Sit at the table and break this down.
Thank you, Auntie. And yes, this move is bigger than uniforms. China has been trying to slide into the American sneaker market for years, and ANTA is its flagship weapon. They see basketball as a cultural highway into Black America, the market that shapes global sports styles. By giving Kyrie executive power and equity, ANTA isn't just signing an athlete, they're aligning themselves with Black cultural influence. Meanwhile, American brands have taken Black athletes' cultural power for granted. They give endorsement deals, but not ownership. They partner with powerhouse PWIs, but leave HBCUs out of the conversation. So the irony is this. China is stepping in and offering Black athletes the kind of control and partnership that U.S. corporations refuse to even consider. That's not just a sponsorship. That's a political strategy. And if ANTA starts using the HBCU investment as a pipeline, not just for uniforms, but NIL deals, athlete-owned shoe lines, and campus partnerships, then yes, they're rewriting the rules. They're challenging America's dominance. And they're doing it by valuing the very people this country built its sports economy on, Black athletes and Black consumers. So let's take this right into the next segment where we break down how the power shift could reshape the new Black athletic economy and what it means for the future of HBCUs.
Let's break down what Kyrie is actually building with ANTA, because this is not your standard athlete sponsor arrangement. Kyrie didn't sign on to lace up a sneaker and pose for a campaign. He stepped into a position that almost no American athlete has ever been offered. At ANTA, Kyrie is the creative director of the entire basketball division. That means he's shaping the vision, the strategy, the product ecosystem, the whole architecture. Nike was never handing him that level of authority. And let's make this plain. Creative director is not a cosmetic title. This isn't pick a colorway and we call it collaboration. This is executive power. It's structural influence. Kyrie has decision-making weight, the kind that affects revenue, culture, global marketing, and long-term product identity. He's not operating as talent anymore. He's operating as leadership. But even that is only half the move. Kyrie's deal includes equity, real ownership, not a cut of sales, not performance bonuses, ownership in the brand he's helping build from the inside. Think about that. The same Kyrie who had to fight Nike over messaging and creative direction now has full creative control and a financial stake in every product that carries his vision. When ANTA wins, he wins. When the culture shifts, he owns a piece of the ship. And by combining equity with creative control, Kyrie is sending a very clear message to the industry. Black athletes deserve more than endorsement checks. They deserve ownership. That's what partnership feels like. That's why this partnership feels less like a shoe deal and more like a blueprint. It challenges an entire system where Black athletes build the culture, but rarely own the machinery behind it. Kyrie isn't participating in the model. He's rewriting it.
Right on, T says. And what Kyrie is doing with that power is building an athlete pipeline that goes way beyond sneakers. Think about the progression. Uniforms today, basketball culture tomorrow. NILs deals next, and eventually athlete-driven partnerships with entire colleges. Kyrie and ANTA are positioning themselves at every touch point of athletic identity, from middle school tournaments to college recruitment to pro-level branding. And planning that pipeline in HBCUs is not random. It's intentional. Paul Quinn College is the first school they announced, but it's part of a 14-school rollout, which means ANTA isn't testing the waters. They're investing. They're embedding themselves into the culture of Black college athletics at a scale that Nike and Adidas have never bothered to do. This is a long-term vision, not temporary charity. And let's be honest, HBCUs are culturally rich, but financially under-resourced. National brands treat them as if they don't exist. But Kyrie is flipping that script by bringing high-quality uniforms, funding, design support, and visibility into HBCU athletic programs. That's how you build loyalty. That's how you build generational partnerships. And that's how you disrupt the industry that has been comfortable for far too long. This pipeline is also an NIL strategy dressed up as sponsorship. You build relationships with players when they're 17, 18, 19 years old. You show up on their campuses. You outfit their team. You become part of their athletic experience. And when it's time for NIL deals, guess who they're going to sign with? The brand that invested in them first. Kyrie is building a long game that Nike completely missed. And what makes this even more powerful is that it's coming from a Black athlete who understands the gaps in the system firsthand. He knows how the power of structure sidelines Black creativity. He knows how HBCUs are treated. He knows how athletes get boxed out of equity. So instead of waiting for a brand to fix it, he partnered with a global company willing to hand him the keys and said, hey, let's build it ourselves. This is why the ANTA partnership is more than headline hype. It is a structural reimagination of the Black athlete economy. Kyrie took ownership, recentered HBCUs, and is creating a model where future athletes could step into creative director roles, revenue sharing, and even athlete-owned sneaker lines. So let's take this energy into the next segment where we break down how all of this connects to global power, the U.S.-China rivalry, and why American corporations are suddenly sweating.
All right, we got to get into the part of this story most sports shows too scared to touch, the geopolitical game. Kyrie linking up with ANTA isn't just an athlete signing with a new brand. It's a global power move. It's happening at a moment when the United States is no longer the only heavyweight shaping the future of sports culture. China figured out something U.S. corporations ignored for decades. Sports culture is soft power. It's influence. It's access. And it travels faster than politics ever could. China uses athletics the same way America uses Hollywood to shape markets, expand reach, and build global loyalty. From manufacturing to endorsements to new international leagues, they've turned sports into a strategic export. At the center of that strategy is ANTA, now the third largest sportswear company in the world. ANTA's rise isn't accidental. They combine manufacturing dominance with global partnerships and aggressive expansion. And now they're aiming directly at the U.S. sneaker economy, the home court that Nike, Jordan, and the entire American sportswear machine have controlled for generations.
Right on, T says. And here's the part people overlook. China's strategy is not random. They deliberately pair manufacturing dominance and celebrity partnership and sports culture to shift global influence. They're not trying to take American consumers. They're trying to take American markets. And the sneaker market is a $1 trillion cultural battlefield. Meanwhile, Nike represents the American corporate power structure to its core. It dominates the culture, but refuses to share actual power. No equity for the athletes, limited creative control. And when it comes to investing in college systems, they pour millions into predominantly white institutions while giving HBCU the bargain bin treatment. That's not accidental. That's a hierarchy. What ANTA did with Kyrie is the exact opposite. They gave him ownership, equity, executive level authority, and full creative control. 3 things Nike would never put in the hands of a Black athlete. And here's the twist. China is using empowerment as a business strategy, not because they're altruistic, but because it's smart geopolitics. China understands something America still underestimates. Black cultural power drives global basketball culture. Black communities create the style, the music, the swagger, the storytelling, and that influences travelers worldwide. American brands built empires off that power while keeping the creators at arm's length. China wants in, and they're doing it through the people who are the culture. Kyrie becomes the perfect bridge. He's influential. He's culturally rooted. He's an independent thinker, and he's willing to step outside the American corporate system. By aligning himself with ANTA, he gains access not just to U.S. markets, but to the Black cultural marketplace, which is far more valuable. If culture is currency, Black America is the mint. And that leads to the question nobody's prepared to answer. Are Black athletes becoming geopolitical assets? Because if Kyrie's creative power, cultural reach, and HBCU partnerships help ANTA break into the America's sneaker market, that's not just business, that's global leverage. That's China using cultural alliances to compete with U.S. corporations. So what does this mean for the new Black athlete economy? It means Black athletes could be positioned at the center of global power competition, with both the U.S. and China fighting for influence through the culture Black athletes create. And the smartest players will use that competition to negotiate ownership, equity, and control at a level the old system never offered. Let's take this to the next segment, where we talk about how this battle plays out on HBCU campuses and why Black institutions suddenly sit at the crossroads of global economics.
Let's bring this home. This is the part of the story corporate America hopes nobody connects. The HBCU angle exposes the whole system. For decades, Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour have treated HBCUs like they optional. They'll pour millions into the big PWIs, build them temples disguised as practice facilities, drop exclusive uniforms every season, and then leave HBCUs with scraps or nothing at all. Walk into a powerhouse PWI and you'll see it. Elite gear, custom tech, equipment rooms that look like Silicon Valley labs. Now look at what most HBCUs get. Outdated uniforms, minimal resources, and no long-term investment. It's not about talent. It's not about culture. It's about profit bias. Corporate America never saw Black institutions as worth the spend, even while profiting off Black athletes at every level. That's why this Kyrie ANTA move hits different. This isn't a sponsorship, it's a disruption. Kyrie and ANTA are refusing to wait for U.S. brands to suddenly develop a conscience. They're investing directly in Black institutions, and that alone forces the uncomfortable question. If a global company from China can see the value of HBCUs, why can't the American brands built on Black sweat, Black culture, and Black genius? And here's the real play. This deal isn't just new uniforms, it's global access. ANTA is plugging HBCUs into an international basketball pipeline, the kind of visibility American companies never offered. That means NIL opportunities abroad, overseas partnerships, international scouting, and future shoe deals for HBCU athletes. Kyrie isn't dropping apparel, he's dropping infrastructure.
Exactly, Auntie says. And that infrastructure is part people underestimate. When a global brand invests in HBCUs, it disrupts the narrative that these institutions are small, local, or secondary. Instead, it positions them as partners in a global sports economy. That's cultural power. That's economic mobility. And that's how you shift the next generation's opportunity. And look at what this creates: a direct pipeline from HBCU athletics to international markets. You have players who might never get a PWI level exposure now being seen by global scouts, global brands, and global audiences. That visibility changes careers. It changes recruiting. And more importantly, it gives HBCUs leverage, financial and cultural, that they've never had in a sneaker economy. So when we talk about Kyrie bringing uniforms, we're underselling it. He's bringing access. He's bringing ownership models. He's bringing the possibility of athlete-run NIL networks and HBCU-driven brand partnerships. And that's why this deal matters culturally. It shifts power back towards Black institutions. Now let's take this into the next segment, where we can break down how the new Black athlete economy is being reshaped by ownership, NIL, and global competition.
Now listen, this is where the plot flips. Because if Kyrie and ANTA are already in HBCU ecosystem with uniforms, visibility, and investment, the next move writes itself. the NIL market. NIL blew the doors off the old system. Companies don't need NCAA approval, athletic directors, or conference relationships. They can go straight to the athlete, straight to the campus, straight to the culture. That's a direct pipeline into Black athletic power that American brands have never allowed. And let's keep it real. ANTA can move quicker than Nike because they don't have to protect American sports hierarchy. Nike has to maintain the PWI pyramid. ANTA doesn't. ANTA could walk into a freshman dorm tomorrow with a shoe contract. They can hand an HBCU athlete a custom line under Kyrie's creative director banner before a PWI scout even shows up. NIL is the first playing field where the gatekeepers can't close the door, and ANTA understands how to weaponize that freedom. Picture this, an HBCU athlete getting a signature shoe deal before a kid at Duke or Alabama. That has never happened under the American system. The system was built to make sure it never happened. But ANTA can change that with one deal. Kyrie can normalize that with one decision. And once it happens, Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour will have to respond in ways they've been dodging for generations. NIL is the one arena the old guard can't rig. But the real power play is bigger than individual athletes. ANTA could ink entire HBCU teams, entire programs. They could build athlete-driven apparel deals, team-wide NIL partnerships, revenue sharing systems. Models American companies refuse to touch because they shift power to the players. But ANTA, with Kyrie pushing equity, creativity, and ownership, they might step right into that lane. And that's how you flip the entire college sports economy on its head.
Exactly. And from a geopolitical perspective, this is the moment where China could challenge America's sneaker dominance at the college level. Nike built its empire by owning college athletics, March Madness, bowl games, football uniforms, basketball contracts. NIL breaks that monopoly. If ANTA enters this space aggressively, Nike loses the one arena it controlled unchallenged for 40 years. And this is why HBCUs matter strategically. They're culturally influential, underfunded, undervalued by corporate America, and hungry for partnerships that respect them. That makes them the perfect launching pad for a global brand looking for quick growth and long-term loyalty. If ANTA empowers HBCUs before Nike does, the cultural shift will hit the industry like an earthquake. So yes, ANTA entering the NIL market is more than a business possibility. It's a threat to the American sneaker hierarchy and a new lane of opportunity for Black athletes. If Kyrie uses his creative director role to build NIL pathways tied to ownership, not just endorsement checks, we're looking at a new model for the Black athlete economy. Let's take this moment into the final segment where we're going to talk about the bigger idea. What happens when Black athletes become central players in a global power competition?
What Kyrie and ANTA are doing isn't just a sneaker headline. It's a preview of the next era. Sports has officially become one of the biggest battlegrounds in the economic rivalry between the United States and China. And basketball, because of its cultural dominance, is sitting dead center in the global tug-of-war. When we talk sneakers, uniforms, training facilities, NIL deals, we're not talking about merch anymore. We're talking about capital, influence, youth culture, and global positioning. Sneakers aren't just fashion. They're a pipeline for power. Whoever controls sneaker culture controls one of the largest cultural currencies on the planet. And right now, China sees that far more clearly than corporate America does. For decades, Nike, Jordan Brand, and Adidas built global empires off Black athletic genius and Black cultural creativity. The entire modern sneaker world, the aesthetics, the hype, the language, the style, came straight from Black America. And yet the power, the ownership, the equity, the generational wealth, that moved right past the creators and into corporate headquarters. China has been paying attention. They've watched U.S. corporations profit from Black culture while giving Black communities almost no real ownership. They see how HBCUs get ignored in the deal-making pipeline. They see the gaps, and ANTA sees the opening. And Kyrie, with cultural credibility, community ties, and an actual executive role, is the perfect bridge into that space. So here's the real question. Can China use basketball as a vehicle to expand influence inside the U.S.? Absolutely. But here's the twist. For the first time, Black athletes can leverage that geopolitical competition for something they were never offered under American corporations: equity, creative control, and true ownership. China wants access to the culture, but this time, Black athletes finally have the leverage to negotiate the terms.
And this is where the negotiations flips. For decades, Black athletes have been the cultural engine of the sneaker world without getting the structural power that comes with that influence. Now geopolitics is putting pressure on that system. China wants in. U.S. brands want to keep control. And Black athletes are sitting in the middle as the most valuable cultural asset on the board. That means their leverage is higher than it's ever been, but only if they recognize it. Because here's the truth. Global power wants the Black culture, what Black culture creates. China sees the market. America sees the market. The difference is that China is willing to offer ownership to get in that door, while U.S. corporations have always relied on loyalty, nostalgia, and branding, not shared power. The question is whether U.S. companies will evolve or double down on control as the competition rises. And that brings us to the big question for this segment. Will Black athletes finally use this moment, this global competition for influence, to demand equity, ownership, and long-term economic power? Or will the American power structure respond by tightening restrictions, limiting freedom, and reinforcing the same gatekeeping norms that have always kept athletes dependent? That's where Kyrie deals become more than a headline. It becomes a test, a case study for the future.
Let's go and bring this in plain and direct. What Kyrie Irving and ANTA are building is bigger than a sneaker contract, bigger than a sponsorship deal, and definitely bigger than basketball. This is a blueprint, a power shift, a signal that the entire economic structure around sports is starting to move. We're watching an athlete claim ownership of his creativity, his culture, and his community in ways American corporations never allowed. We're watching an international brand pour real investment into HBCUs, Black athletes, and Black influence, not as charity, not as optics, but as strategy. And we're watching Black culture sit at the center of a global chessboard where, for the first time, the people who built the culture actually have leverage. This matters because it forces a question that's been ignored for decades. Who benefits from the culture Black athletes create, and who should be benefiting? For too long, corporations extracted value from Black excellence while returning nothing close to ownership or power. But now athletes are in a moment where they can negotiate equity, creative authority, and actual ownership stakes. Done right, this can reshape the future economy of sports. So yes, Kyrie signed a shoe deal. But what's really on the table is power, control, the entire pipeline of who gets access, who gets paid, and who gets to build. Kyrie is building something new. ANTA is building something strategic. And the real question now is whether more athletes will follow this path toward autonomy instead of staying locked in the system where they create the culture but never receive the equity. That's the shift. That's the lesson. And that's why this moment deserves our full attention.
And listen, the takeaway is simple. Support Black athlete controlled brands. Support the deals where the player has equity, ownership, and a voice, not the ones where they're just the face of somebody else's economic agenda. Tap into platforms where the storytelling centers the athlete and exposes the politics behind the game. Platforms like CessTalksSports and BWISE PoliSports Tea Time, where we break down the system, the strategy, and the stakes. Because when Black athletes own their image, their influence, and their intellectual property, the whole game changes.
Before we close, we want you to help us build something real. We're officially launching the Respect Our Game Advocacy Group, a movement dedicated to supporting, protecting, and elevating Black women and Black athletes across every corner of sports. This has been a CessTalksSports BWISE PoliSports Tea Time production. Subscribe, like, comment, share, and advocate with us at respectourgame.online. And whenever you show love to the Black women shifting the culture, make sure you tag it, #RespectOurGame, because action speaks louder than anything posted. Remember, sports are never just about the games we play. They're about the stories we tell and systems we expose. This is Session Favorite Auntie with Uncle Tendencies alongside Political Lil and Trust. We not done pouring the hot tea, y'all. Stay tuned. Talk soon. We out.